Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. US presidential campaign 2024 is in full swing, with the political temperature in the United States of America rising with every single passing day for the polls which are slated for November the 5th. The Republican candidate, former President Donald Trump, and the Democrat Kamala Harris are facing each other off as the presidential candidate amid all what is happening during the presidential election campaign within the United States of America. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has accused Iran of launching cyber attacks on the presidential campaigns of both the candidates, with the FBI saying in a statement, let me quote, "We have observed increasingly aggressive Iranian activity during the election cycle, specifically involving influence operations targeting the American public and cyber operations targeting presidential campaigns," unquote. Earlier, we saw the Trump campaign had also accused Iran of having hacked one of their websites. On the other hand, we have seen Iran has clearly rejected these allegations, with the UN mission of Iran saying in a statement, let me quote, "Such allegations are unsubstantiated and devoid of any standing. Should the US government genuinely believe in the validity of its claims, it should furnish us with the pertinent evidence, if any, to which we will respond accordingly," unquote. We've also seen back in 2016, Russia was accused by the US officials of having meddled into the presidential elections, because of which Donald Trump won the election and became the president of the United States of America. And we saw the Russian president Vladimir Putin denying those allegations at that time, saying, let me quote, "We didn't meddle, we aren't meddling, and we will not meddle in any elections." We'll be talking about this particular phenomenon of foreign interference in the US presidential election since 2016. Then there was a similar sort of report back in 2020 also. And now, just when the US presidential elections are around the corner, this particular report and assessment by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, what does that basically signify? Let me quickly bring in our esteemed panel of guests. We are honored to have been joined in the studio by Mr. Nasir Ali Khan, his former ambassador. Mr. Khan, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. Also, at the same time, on Skype, we are honored to have been joined by Mr. Ather Tirmizi, his senior analyst. Mr. Tirmizi, thank you very much for your time also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Mr. Khan, if you allow me, let me begin the discussion with Mr. Tirmizi. Mr. Tirmizi, before we head into the discussion and taking your analysis regarding these allegations on Iranians this time as compared to those allegations which were for the Russians at that particular time back in 2016 and then also back in 2020, I just want to have your understanding where Democrats are standing at this particular point in time. We saw the change in the candidacy, and what had been the major takeaways so far when we talk about the Democratic National Convention.
Assalamu alaikum, first of all, to you, the panelists, and the audience. Thanks for having me. So, you are absolutely right. It seems like that every election cycle for the last 8 years comes under the scrutiny of how certain countries are attacking the integrity of United States elections. It was Russia, now it's Iran. And that's a theme that to some Americans and some voters, it makes a difference and it makes them motivate and come out and vote, because to Americans, we believe that the integrity of U.S. election, specifically after 2020, what had happened, where President Donald Trump had said that there was a rigged election and there was an attack on the U.S. Capitol, I think foreign interference has become a big deal. In the United States, there is a FARA law, which is FARA, Foreign Agent Registration Act, Under that, a lot of people had been arrested. In fact, since 2016, where people were working for foreign governments on the payroll, but without declaring that they're working for the government. So the FARA rule has been really applied, and had been a lot of people have been arrested um, uh, under that act. But when it comes to the core of the both Republican and Democratic message, these are the messages that may motivate some people. Because what happens is that when you look at a voter, an average voter, what makes them come out and vote? They have to be angry about something. A happy voter, unfortunately, does not vote. And the challenge for Democrats right now is that how to motivate the voters to really come out and vote. And Kamala Harris, she has been definitely energized the party from President Joe Biden's stance, where people were very leery. In fact, there was a statement the former President Donald Trump actually said that I shouldn't have debated him because I debated him. Everybody said, oh, now he's not good and now we have to switch. He said I shouldn't have debated him because I would have won. So the Trump campaign is also, reeling from the change, and there's been excitement, of course, in the Democratic base. And both parties are going to try to use any kind of narrative that's going to get a voter to be worried or nervous or angry, because those are the emotions that voters going to come out and vote for. If those emotions are not there and a voter is happy, generally satisfied with their lives, they'll not vote. That's a general conception of voting in America, that we have to have a boogeyman, so to speak, that who are we going to be afraid of? And you rightfully said it was Russia, it was the Mexican, it was the border wall in 2016 for the Republicans. For Democrats, it's the anti-immigrant policy, anti-women's right policies. So, they're just at this point throwing what sticks, and then they're going to go from there.
So where, Mr. Tirmizi, where do you see Democrats standing right now with the DNC underway? What had been the major takeaways during the last 3 days? And do you think they've mustered enough strength after Kamala Harris being the candidate for presidency from the Democrats, enough momentum to give a tough challenge to Donald Trump?
I wouldn't say tough challenge, but I would say challenge, absolutely. And there's a reason for that. The reason is that with Joe Biden, a lot of the donors and voters were just not happy because people thought that at his age and his debate performance, they were not going to be able to win the election. And now, Kamala Harris, vice president, is almost like a ceremonial position in the United States. You have some policy that like Kamala Harris was overseeing the border policy, which Republicans are painting that it wasn't as good because there are a lot more undocumented people came to the United States. But the major takeaway with the DNC is that look, Joe was the past, and Kamala is the future. And for Democrats, a large segment of Democratic Party being woman president also matters. There for Democratic base, there was a Roe versus Wade Supreme Court decision that was overturned and was about the abortion rights. So there's a large segment of Democratic voters who care about the abortion rights. So they're trying to muster that okay, Kamala is new, she's energetic, she is again identity politics, African American, she's Asian, she's a woman, which to some voters definitely makes a difference. But to the large American base, if you make them feel happy, again, a happy voter doesn't vote. These people at the convention, they're delegates, right? They're elected delegates. So the convention, you will see the excitement because these are the like hardcore party people. But
So
that's
Mr.
not an
Tirmizi,
average American.
what are the opinion polls suggesting at this particular point? Who is ahead?
So there, so opinion polls always matters in key battleground states, right? A general national poll may not make a difference because think about it, 2016, Hillary Clinton got more votes than Donald Trump, but she didn't get the votes in the specific states because in the United States, the elections are about electoral college, so each state has a specific amount of votes, and you have to have a certain amount of votes to win the presidency. So popular vote in these elections don't matter. So there are certain states in Kamala Harris where Joe Biden was behind: Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Florida. Are these are like the battleground states where they are going to fight. And these are the states, sometimes they have gone Democrats, sometimes they have gone with the Republicans. So some polls suggest they're toe to toe. Some polls put Kamala Harris ahead. But also in an election cycle, I have done plenty of campaigns, including Joe Biden's 2020 campaign. Problem in campaigns are that if you peak too early and you're ahead in the poll, we are in August, September, October, November. We are about 10 to 12 weeks away from election. Will people have the same enthusiasm in 12 weeks as they are having right now? So she'll probably get a bump because of it's in the news cycle. Will she be able to sustain it? That's we have to see that.
Right, Mr. Tirmizi, please stay with us. Let me bring in Ambassador Khan also into the discussion. Mr. Khan, when we talk about the change of candidacy, President Joe Biden relinquishing the position of candidacy for being the next president of the United States of America, do you think the Democrats under Kamala Harris up till now have gained that momentum that perhaps it could give some tougher challenge to Donald Trump's campaign?
Well, it's certainly given a fillip to the Democratic presidential campaign because initially a lot of people, especially the Democrats, were quite despondent because not only the performance of President Biden in
the first presidential
debate, but also generally he came across as somebody who was a little infirm. Even walking up the steps of a plane or giving a speech or meeting certain people, there were many occasions. So the general perception was either there is a medical problem or he is simply too old for the job, and the campaign trail is far too tiring. And of course, with Kamala coming in, it gave a new boost to the campaign. As you can see, within the first 2 weeks, she raised, in fact, in the first week, she raised about $200 million. Now they've said that they're going to spend about $370 million on their advertising campaign. So their fundraising is still going strong.
So would it translate into getting substantial outcome in the elections?
That is very difficult to say. It is still a very closely fought election. Wherever there has been an improvement, it is of a few points here and there. Right now, amongst the so-called swing states, because the swing states also over the years and decades have been changing. Presently, Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and of course South Carolina and Nevada are considered swing states. These are states which in the last election were won or lost by less than a margin of 3%. So right now, she is leading in 3 of these so-called swing states. But as I said, it's still a very, very closely fought election. And the whole public is clearly divided. There are some people, for example, who are openly saying that if Trump loses, we are going to have a civil war. So there are 2 extremes here. And in between are those undecided voters. And of course, I feel that with the coming of Kamala, a lot of Democratic voters who probably would have stayed away and not voted for either of the candidates have become energized and have become involved in the campaign. But it's still a very, very closely fought race, and it isn't one, as was being said by a colleague here, by a popular vote. There are big states like California and Florida where winner takes all. That's how the electoral...
And who is exactly that you just mentioned that said if Trump loses, it's going to lead into a civil war?
One of the MAGA voters, okay. And
Okay, so so if the election result goes in the favor of Kamala Harris and Trump loses, so what do you foresee? What's your understanding tells you what's going to be probably the future? Is it really going to lead into some public riots, as we saw that happening at Capitol Hill?
Well, yes, the public, especially the MAGA, the Make America Great Again supporters, the die-hard Trump supporters, are highly charged. So as it happened on January 6th, 2021, it is quite possible. If you ask me, there is going to be trouble on the streets, but I don't think the American state is so weak that it cannot handle anything like that.
Okay, let me once again go back to Mr. Tirmizi. Mr. Tirmizi, when we are discussing the US presidential election, we often get to talk and hear about the importance of the swing states. For the general understanding of the common masses over here, in the simplest of terms, how do you explain what these swing states are and how crucial they happen to be?
So, in a simplest terms, each state has a specific votes based on the number of seats they have, right? So, the number of congressional seats they have, that's the number of votes they will get. So, for example, New York State has maybe 28 votes, Florida has 29 votes, Pennsylvania has 20 votes. Now, in presidential election, specifically, let's say in Pennsylvania, you got more Republican votes against the Democrat votes. Then that state and the votes of that state, all of the 20 votes of that state, goes to the party who won that state. So if Republicans win, they take that state. If Democrats win, they take that state. And you need about, I think, 270 to win. And the math is that, okay, California has X amount of votes, New York has X amount of votes, and Seattle has X amount of votes, and these are solid Democratic states. How many votes they will have? Florida, Kentucky, Georgia, South Carolina, Dakota, North Dakota, South Dakota. They're solid Republican states, so they'll always go to Republicans. So how many votes are those? And then what happens, these swing states, sometimes they go vote for Republicans because the number of independent voters registered there. Sometimes they go vote for Republicans, again, based on the number of independent registered voters there. And those independent voters sometimes vote more towards Republican, sometimes vote more towards Democrats, and we have seen that shift.
Mr. Tirmizi, what are those key factors that actually make those independents to vote for either of the two? Is there any specific established pattern, specifically when we talk about since 2016, then in 2020, and do we see any sort of pattern being repeated this time around when it comes to swing states in particular?
So in those swing states, the interesting thing is that these voters are not the hard left or the hard right. These are not the people who will say, okay, my ideology is liberal, my ideology is conservative. These will be issue-based voters. So in 2016, Donald Trump was talking about America first. We need to talk about America. We need to take care of America. We are sending too much foreign aid. We have people who are homeless here. And those independent voters, the matter to them was that, okay, look, we need that. He's right. So we need to worry about America first. In 2020, Donald Trump had just become this, everything around Donald Trump had just become media circus. It was just so much that came out of Donald Trump. We had COVID, how he handled COVID. He sometime in privately said COVID was absolutely, not good for the United States, but publicly he was saying, oh yeah, no, you can easily do it, this, that, the other. And in 2020, for these independent voters were COVID and the economy. How did Donald Trump handle the COVID? How did he handle the economy? How come he didn't shut down America before or as early as should have been? So those independent voters then said, okay, we cannot have this guy. So they voted for Joe Biden. This time around, I think independent voters are solely focused on economy, the housing crisis, the border crisis that has become a crisis at this point with the open borders. And I think these independent voters are talking about two or three issues. The challenge with Donald Trump is that he doesn't stay on focus. He doesn't focus on just the that, hey, listen, you 4 years were under Kamala Harris and Biden, the economy is okay, but border crisis has been horrible. Homelessness, housing crisis have become really, really unbearable for Americans. He doesn't stay on that topic. He goes on and talk about Joe Biden. He goes on and talk about other issues that how Justice Department has been targeting him. For Democrats, the challenge is how do they really come out ahead of this and say, no, 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 economy was great when it wasn't, or there was no housing crisis. Because when you are the governing party, all the bad things that are happening, whether it's because of you or because of something else, are your problem. So Democrats are already behind. They have the advantages that Donald Trump doesn't stay on the topic, so they can talk about it. And Donald Trump, if he stays on topic and just focus on economy, just focus on the housing crisis, the immigration, the crime, then Democrats going to have challenge. So both parties have dynamics. I think independent voters are really focused on the housing and the economy in generally, and that's if Donald Trump doesn't stay on the message, Kamala may win. Um, but I think the state of the economy definitely will play a big. Every poll that you can take, Gallup, ABC, CNBC, you know, Fox News, economy is always either one or two, number one issue or number two issue on those polls. So independent voters are definitely looking at the economy.
Your point is well taken. Do you also foresee any sort of public riots happening if Donald Trump doesn't win the presidency this time around?
I think what had happened after January the 6th in 2021 when there was a riots on the Capitol, I think uh, there's going to be huge deterrence, right? Because um, what they did since then, how many people have been arrested, how many people have been prosecuted, how many people have been sentenced. And in the United States, the thing is this, right? People are emotional, absolutely. But in generally, the basic necessities, whether you're Republican or Democrat, are being met. When you go home, you have electricity. When you want to cook, you have gas. When it's cold, the majority of the people have heat. When it's hot, majority of the people have AC. When your basic necessities are met and you living an okay life, then people shy away that, okay, look, last time there was a riot and these people's lives are ruined now. They lost jobs, they're in jail. Do we really need to be
Right,
in the streets? Yeah,
Mr.
there may be
Tirmizi, I seek your
protests.
pardon for interjection over here. I'll come back to you to take your understanding whether if Kamala Harris wins, would Donald Trump accept the results? That's a very important question. I'll come back to you to take your answer regarding that. But before that, we have to take a short break. And after the break, we'll resume the discussion from here. Hello and welcome back to Views on News. I am Jawad. In today's program, we are talking about how the presidential election campaign in the United States of America is going on, and also the accusations the Federal Bureau of Investigation has launched against the Iranians, saying that Iranians are involved in cyber attacks on the presidential campaigns of both the candidates. We are joined in the studio by Mr. Nasir Ali Khan, former ambassador, and on Skype by Mr. Ather Tirmizi, his senior analyst. Mr. Khan, let me resume the discussion from the point where we left from before the break with Mr. Tirmizi. Mr. Tirmizi, the most important question is whether Donald Trump would accept the results if he loses.
So I think uh, with his age, and I think with everything that has happened, this is his probably last chance to run for the president. I don't think he's going to run for the president when he's in 80s. So for him, he has nothing to lose after this election. So if he loses the election, I don't think he's going to accept. Because when he legitimately lost the election and he had the chance to run again, he still didn't accept it. He had all these claims about fraudulent votes and all that.
Is it going to lead into massive riots over there in the US?
There are going to be protests, right? So I think I think there is definitely going to be people protesting in the streets. I don't think there are going to be riots, but protests, absolutely. There are hardcore mega supporters who are emotionally charged, who really want to see Donald Trump to become the president. But do I believe that there are going to be riots? I don't know if there are going to be riots, but will there be protests? I think yes, people will come out in the streets and people will protest. It'll last for a little bit, but like everything else, life moves on. United States moves on. Americans move on. After January 6th, it was a big day for United States. But 3 4 months later, an average voter is not talking about it. So I think if that happened, and again, it's up to Donald Trump. If he accepts and he said, okay, yeah, they were legitimate results, and I accept the defeat, then no. But if he goes on and carries on and on and on about election being fraud and how he lost and it was rigged, then yeah, people are going to come out naturally in the streets and protest. I don't think there'll be riots, but protests absolutely.
Right. A quick last question regarding those accusations by FBI on Iranians. If Trump wins, what would that particularly mean, given the track record of earlier accusations made against Russia by Federal Bureau of Investigation back in 2016 also, and also back in 2020? If Trump wins, would it mean that it was Russian interference into the elections?
I don't think so. Right now, what's going to happen is that they're going to talk about Iran, they're going to talk about Russia, they're going to talk about other things to make people fearful that, look, I am the right person. Donald Trump has a personality type that he said that I'm a strong arm and I'm going to make sure that people listen to us and respect us. And Kamala Harris and the Joe Biden administration, they don't have that talking point. But I think what people fear more right now on the Democratic side is not like an Iran influence or Russian influence. What they are fearful is that if Donald Trump to become president, he's gonna change those institutions. And America has so far survived and thrived because of the institutions that we have, right? Department of Justice, the FBI, the CIA, the judiciary, independence, accountability, all of that. People on the Democratic side are fearful not about the interference in the election from any country, but what Donald Trump may do to those institutions to alter the course of the United States.
Right, Mr. Ather Tirmizi, senior analyst, joining us on Skype. Thank you very much for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Mr. Khan, let's talk about these allegations made by the FBI against the Iranians this time around. Back in 2016, we saw similar sort of accusations against the Russians. Back in 2020, again, similar sort of report by the same department of FBI talking about Russians wanting Trump to win, but not that much of indication that point towards the fact that in 2020, Russians actually went ahead with interference. This time, they have accused Iran of having launched cyber attacks in order to interfere in this particular presidential election campaign. Let's talk about, when you talk about presumably, if these allegations are correct, what could be the motive behind if Iranians have gone for these cyber attacks?
Well,
Could it be for getting the candidate that they like at the end of the day as the election outcome, or is it to generally destabilize the United States of America?
Okay, we're just talking hypothetically because we have no proof. As you know, there was a major FBI investigation on the Russian interference, and at the end of the day,
there was no conclusive proof.
Any incontrovertible evidence. But as far as your question about why would Iran want to interfere in the US elections, well, let me give you an example. When President Obama was in office, he made a deal with Iran, which gave them certain space in exchange for inspections and for suspending their nuclear program.
The Iran nuclear deal.
When Mr. Trump came, he immediately cancelled the whole deal. Now, this is an international binding deal that a president has done. So it was a major thing to happen. Now, there are many, many dynamics, many other players, including Israel and Saudis and all that, who were obviously happy about it. I'm not saying they were involved or put pressure on it. But just to give you an example, there is this possibility. If your question is, why would Iran want to do it? Maybe they perceive one party as being easy on them.
That is
and
exactly the
not.
question that I want to ask. You just mentioned of President Donald Trump pulling out of that Iran nuclear deal. He had pursued that policy of maximum pressure, that assassination of General Qasem Soleimani happening at that time. Then we come into the next term, the Biden administration. Don't you think the relationship between the US and Iranians have worsened during this under this administration, also given the conflict that is in the Middle East, the Gaza situation, the kind of relentless support coming from the Biden administration towards Israel, and the kind of standoff Israel and Iranians been having since 7th of October?
Absolutely. Now look, there are two events that have made a difference.
The question is, why would Iranians want a certain specific candidate when there isn't going to be any change of policy towards them, whether it be Republicans or the Democrats?
No, we are just talking in hypotheticals now. But you see, the point I'm trying to make is, since the time that President Obama did this nuclear deal with Iran, a lot has changed. Firstly, it's a comparison between the two parties, okay? The Republican Party has basically been taken over by the MAGA movement, and Trump is somebody that absolutely runs the show. I'll give you an example of Liz Cheney, who was a Republican senator. She opposed him openly, and she had to actually leave the party. So there are many such examples. What I'm trying to say is, today, the sort of situation that you have, there is a clear divide, okay? And as far as we were talking about the so-called voters which are sitting on the fence, or the independent voters that are part of the swing states, these are not just issues that will come up. When we talk about cyber attacks and cyber security, it does not only have its origins abroad. There are lots of cyber attacks going on within the United States. To give you an example, in the 2016 elections, there is a gentleman called Robert Mercer. He used to, in 1972, he worked with IBM in their research department, developing algorithms that were calculating what people who are online actually feel, okay? Based on that, he was inducted by a company called Renaissance Hedge Fund, where he was making money using a similar algorithm by determining what people are really thinking through the activities online. The same man started to help Donald Trump in his campaign and involved a company that he was part owner of. You must have heard of Cambridge Analytica. Now, even Mark Zuckerberg had to go before a committee to explain why 50 million records were given out for people to analyze. And that is the guidance that he got. It clearly affected the elections. Apart from that, there are so many mainstream media organizations like Fox News or MSNBC who have a tilt one way or the other, and there's a lot of fake information that they're putting out. There is no control on that either. So, you know, this is all part of how politics has developed within the United States.
Your point is well taken, very comprehensively elaborated as to that use of API tool also. And Mark Zuckerberg testifying before the Congressional Committee also. Let me bring in another participant in the show, Mr. Ali Gauhar. He's foreign affairs expert. Mr. Gauhar, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. What sense do you make of these accusations by the FBI against Iranians of launching cyber attacks in order to influence the US presidential elections?
this isn't as new as people think. I mean, 11 years ago, the Iranians were also accused by the Americans of infiltrating some of their key banks, the Bank of America and JP Morgan Chase. But the unique feature of this case is that now they're accusing them of interfering in the presidential election. Now, last year, I think it was March 2023, last year, the Biden administration actually issued an executive order prohibiting government use of commercial spyware. So the short-term goal of that was to just gain an understanding of the threat the threat of spyware in general, of this global surveillance in general. That's the short-term goal, for them at least. And they also understand what they now know is that Europe have been selling their spyware technology with very little limitations. Galileo is an example. Galileo spyware, which the Italians sold, with no restrictions. So I think this is very important here, because Kamala Harris has been speaking a lot about various topics, but one thing she has to hone in on, and so does Donald Trump, is global surveillance, turning the tide on spyware threats. And at the epicenter of all this, we talk about Europe selling their products without much regulation. But at the epicenter of all this is actually Israel. Israel hosts a number of important groups, like the NSO, which is actually responsible for making Pegasus, which is known for infiltrating mobile phones. And it actually infected. A study argues that
Mr. Gauhar, was it Pegasus which was also used for, if I am correct, for tapping the phone of the former Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel also?
But as your last guest quite correctly said, I mean, this is all just speculation right now. We don't want to get into that, but it's been said that over 450 mobile phones were infiltrated. So the US are very aware of this threat. So now they're accusing Iran and Russia and China. So if this is happening, I mean, the US need to take a long, hard look at themselves, because they've been aware of this for quite a while. Now, if it's so easy for a country like Iran to be able to infiltrate emails of key politicians, some of Donald Trump's key people, I mean, that's something that they ought to think about, and a failure on their part.
What do you understand when we talk about this particular Pegasus and the spyware softwares? I mean, how the international community could be taking steps in order to deal with this particular threat?
You see, when you accuse an enemy country of having cyber attacks on your nation, it doesn't, I mean, what they can achieve in attacking during the elections is minor compared to what they could achieve by attacking infrastructure, you taking out your airports or your railway system.
So doesn't that become so obvious if they are taking out the infrastructure
just as
directly?
obvious as the so-called cyber attacks for the elections. You see, the cyber attacks during elections can be of two types. One is that you use artificial intelligence to create images and realistic videos and text at the prompt of a simple word or so, which AI then makes very realistic videos that you can put out. These can influence the voting public. Either it can cause fear amongst them, or it can prevent them from going to the voting booth. It could also give them the perception that even registering as a voter is far too difficult, so we won't bother doing that. These are the ways that they can influence this. But there are organizations like CISA, Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is a very large, well-funded organization that is constantly working against cyber attacks within the United States. And then all the different election administrations, they are also, not only their staff is being cautioned and taught and trained against such possibilities, but they themselves are reaching out to the voting public, to the candidates, as well as the local media, to show them what the pitfalls or the dangers of such cyber attacks are, and how to counter through fact checking, through tools, that you can deploy.
Right. Mr. Gauhar, your last quick closing comment. I'm just curious about knowing whether the information that has already become public or is easily available to public, can we consider that it could also be hacked? Or when we talk specifically about the phenomenon of hacking, is it just for the classified information? What's your understanding?
Well, again, where these allegations, Jawad, are in its nascent stages. So again, I'm just going to go back to what your first guest quite rightly said. Right now, we're just speculating at the moment, but it is very possible that these cyber attacks can get through and infiltrate highly classified information. That's what not just America, but all countries are worried about. And the spread, most importantly, of misinformation. I'm just going to change the goalpost a little bit here, then we can get back to the topic. Just yesterday, or day before that, a Pakistani citizen was arrested in Lahore for putting out misinformation against the Stockport attacks. There was a stabbing that happened in England last month. And then there was lots of misinformation, but they managed to catch.
Mr. Ali Gauhar, I seek your pardon for the interjection over here. Unfortunately, we're short of time. I'll have to end the show right here. Ali Gauhar joining us on Sky, Foreign Affairs expert. Thank you very much for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Mr. Nasir Ali Khan, former ambassador, thank you very much for your time also.
Thank you.
Being with us on the show tonight and with such an insightful discussion on such an important matter. We really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.